Today with this grandmother, you will learn about how to improve communication and understanding in relationships. If you want to discover the best advice a grandmother could give you, stay until the end of the video. If you enjoy this type of video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more videos like this. We will explore important aspects of human psychology, how men can learn to better understand the emotions and needs of their partners, and how to build a relationship based on respect and empathy. Life teaches us that love is at the heart of relationships, but understanding and wisdom are the foundations that sustain them. One of the first lessons life has given me is that empathy is the key to everything. The bad thing about not putting ourselves in the other's shoes is that we become judges and not partners. I remember a young man who visited me worried because he did not understand why his partner was distant. "Son," I said, "have you asked how he feels, or are you just looking from your own perspective?" Sometimes, all it takes is to stop for a moment and ask with genuine interest, "What do you need from me?" Human psychology tells us that emotions are not always rational, and that is okay. The downside of expecting your partner to always act logically is that you forget that people feel before they think. If your partner is upset, don't try to solve everything right away. Learn to validate their emotions. A simple phrase like, "I understand that this makes you feel that way," can defuse a conflict before it escalates. It's also important to recognize that not all people express love in the same way. Some show it with words, others with actions, some with gifts or shared time. The downside of assuming that we all love the same is that it can lead to misunderstandings. I once knew a couple where he worked long hours to provide stability, thinking that was how he showed his love, while she longed for more time together. They talked, and he learned that balancing their time was what really strengthened their relationship. Sometimes, dear loving means learning each other's language. Another important reflection I would like to share is about patience. The downside of rushing things is that we don't allow people to be themselves. Building a relationship takes time because really getting to know someone is like reading a book page by page. I once told my grandson, who was eager to get married, "Don't rush to finish the book without understanding what each chapter says." Each stage of a relationship has its magic and its lesson, so live each moment to the fullest. And my dear, never underestimate the power of honesty. The bad thing about keeping quiet about what you feel for fear of creating conflict is that those unspoken words become walls that hinder communication. Don't be afraid to express your emotions, but do so with respect and calm. A conversation from the heart can solve more than you imagine. Life has taught me that relationships are not perfect, but that is what makes them real. If you are willing to learn, listen, and grow with your partner, you will discover that even difficult times can be opportunities to strengthen love. Take these reflections with you, son, and apply them wisely. Because in the end, love is not about finding someone perfect, but about building something true with patience, empathy, and mutual respect. Building a strong relationship isn't just about grand gestures or meaningful moments. It's the day-to-day that defines the strength of a bond. Every little act, every loving word, and every look of understanding add up more than any grand declaration. Let me tell you something I've learned in my years of marriage. The bad thing about expecting love to be like in the movies is that you forget that real love is built in the details. I remember one afternoon when my husband came home from work exhausted. He'd had a long, hard day, and it showed on his face. Instead of demanding attention from him or for him to share his problems with me, I simply served him a bowl of hot soup and sat beside him in silence. Stay until the end and discover the most important lesson only a grandmother can teach you. If you enjoy this type of video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more videos like this. After a while he started talking, and when he finished he looked at me and said, "Thank you for understanding me without me having to explain everything. Sometimes words aren't needed. Just being present and available for the other person is enough." Now, I can't stop talking about the bad thing about holding on to resentments. When you don't talk about what hurts, those little thorns become deep wounds. I've always believed that even if pride is hard to swallow, a timely apology can save a relationship. Humility is a virtue that few value, but it is one of the most powerful for healing. Don't be afraid to admit your mistakes, son, because doing so doesn't make you weak, it makes you wise. Something I also see a lot in young couples is this tendency to measure who gives more in the relationship as if it were a competition. The bad thing about this mentality is that you forget that love is not an exchange but a mutual giving. There are days when one will give more because the other can't. But if both are willing to support each other, the scales will always end up balancing. Learning to be generous with your time, your words, and your gestures is essential. And speaking of gestures, never underestimate the power of gratitude. The bad thing about taking your partner for granted is that, over time, both of you start to feel invisible. A simple "thank you for this" or "I love what you do for us" can brighten the other person's day. Gratitude is like a bridge that connects hearts, even in times of difficulty. On the other hand, son, it is also important to talk about boundaries. The bad thing about not setting them is that you lose sight of who you are and what you need. A healthy relationship does not mean that you must be available at all times or sacrifice your dreams completely. You must learn to say no when something goes against your well-being. An authentic love is not offended by your boundaries. On the contrary, it respects and values them. I want you to remember something very important. Love is not linear. There will be good days and bad days, moments of passion and others of distance, shared laughter and silences that may weigh. The bad thing about expecting everything to be perfect is that you set yourself up for disappointment. Relationships flourish when both people accept that challenges are part of the journey and choose to face them together. And before I finish, let me talk to you about time. The bad thing about not prioritizing your partner is that, over time, the connection weakens. Just as you water a plant so that it grows, you must nurture your relationship with constant attention and care. Turn off your phone when you are together, listen actively, and look for ways to surprise your partner, even with the simplest gestures. Sometimes, a lovingly prepared cup of coffee in the morning says more than 1,000 words. Now, son, I want to leave you with this final reflection. Love is not something that just happens. It is something you choose and cultivate every day. Do not be afraid to make mistakes, because every misstep is an opportunity to learn. The important thing is that you always act from respect, empathy, and the intention to build something beautiful and lasting. Live with love, act with wisdom, and remember that a happy relationship is not perfect but authentic. May my words serve as a guide, and may you always find someone on your path willing to walk by your side with the same commitment and love that you offer. Something I would like you to understand is the bad thing about not listening with your heart. Many men, in their eagerness to solve problems, forget that sometimes women do not need an immediate solution, but simply to feel heard and understood. There is an old saying that goes, "Listen not to respond, but to understand." This was taught to me by my grandfather, a quiet but wise man. If you're interested in learning the wisest advice a grandmother could give, don't miss the end of the video. If you enjoy this type of video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more videos like this. I remember that when we were children and we fought between brothers, he would never intervene immediately. He would sit us down and listen to us patiently until we finished talking. Only then would he give us his advice, and believe me, his words had a weight that calmed our souls. From this teaching I learned that communication is not just talking, it is above all listening. Do you know how many couples wear themselves out because they do not understand each other? Not because they do not love each other, but because they do not take the time to listen to what the other really feels. And I am not just talking to you about words, son, because sometimes silence also has something to say. Observe your partner, look at his gestures, his tone of voice, his gaze. There you will find many answers. I also want to talk to you about the bad thing about expecting everything to come from the other. Love is not a monologue, it is a constant dialogue. If you want to be understood, you must also be willing to understand. Years ago, I met a neighbor who had a long and apparently happy marriage. But one day she sat down with me and said, "It seems that I am the only one who makes an effort in this relationship." Her sadness broke my heart because she gave so much, but her husband had settled, always expecting to receive without giving anything in return. Don't be that person, son. If you want your relationship to flourish, do your part every day without excuses. And speaking of excuses, let me tell you something else. The bad thing about postponing important things is that life passes and opportunities go away. Many times I hear couples say, "Later we will take that trip. There will be time to talk about that. One of these days we will fix things." But you know what? That one of these days doesn't always come. Something is important to you or your partner, do it now. Tell her today how much you love her. Try to resolve those conflicts that have been left hanging in the air, and don't let time deepen the distance. I also want to tell you about the bad thing about competing in a relationship. There are couples who, without realizing it, become rivals instead of partners. They strive to prove who is right, who does more, who is stronger. But in love there is no room for competition. My husband and I were very different. He was practical and calm, while I was a dreamer and somewhat impulsive. Instead of fighting over our differences, we learned to complement each other. He taught me to see things calmly, and I showed him how to enjoy the small pleasures in life. Together we were a team, not adversaries. And this brings me to another reflection. The bad thing about not valuing differences. Many couples fall into the trap of trying to change the other, thinking that if they were more like them, everything would be easier. But son, let me tell you that the magic of love lies in those differences. Accepting and celebrating what makes your partner unique is one of the keys to building a strong and lasting relationship. Sure, there will be things that can be improved over time, but always from respect and acceptance. Now, let me tell you about the bad thing about forgetting the details. Sometimes we think that love is an immense feeling that does not need to be demonstrated, but that is not true. Love is fueled by small and significant acts. One day when I was young, I caught a terrible cold, and my husband, instead of going to work, stayed home. He did nothing extraordinary, he just made tea, arranged the blankets, and made sure I was comfortable. That gesture, so simple, made me feel more loved than any expensive gift or grandiose declaration. I also want to remind you of the bad thing about not taking care of yourself. In a relationship, It is easy to fall into the idea that everything should revolve around the other person, but that is not the case. If you want to discover the best advice a grandmother could give you, stay until the end of the video. If you enjoy this type of video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more videos like this. If you do not take care of yourself, if you do not value yourself, it will be difficult for you to give your best. Make sure you grow as a person, pursue your dreams, and maintain your physical and emotional well-being. A healthy relationship is one where both people are independent, but choose to share their life from fullness, not from necessity. Finally, son, I want to talk to you about the bad thing about forgetting the purpose of love. Love is not just company, nor just passion, nor just habit. Love is a motor, something that drives us to be better, to build together, to face life with more strength. Always remember why you chose your partner and allow him, her to remind you why she chose you. When both of you have that purpose in mind, it will be much easier to overcome any obstacle. So there you have my reflections based on the years, on the joys and the tears, on the mistakes and the successes. I hope my words serve as a guide on your path, and that you always remember that love, even though it is sometimes complicated, is one of the most beautiful gifts that life gives us. Cultivate it, take care of it, and enjoy it. And if you ever have doubts, remember that I will be here with all the love of this grandmother to give you advice or simply listen to you. And finally, my son, I want to leave you with one last thought, one that I consider the most important of all. The bad thing about not being grateful. In life, and especially in a relationship, gratitude is a seed that never stops bearing fruit. Be grateful for every small gesture, every kind word, every shared moment. Be grateful even for the differences, because they help you grow and understand the person at your side more deeply. We often take for granted what we have. But I assure you that if you begin to see each day as a gift, your heart will be filled with peace and love. A relationship is not perfect, and no one is exempt from making mistakes. But the simple act of recognizing and valuing the other's effort is an act that strengthens the bond. Remember that love is not about being perfect, but about being authentic. It is about learning to share life with someone else, with all that implies. The joys, the sorrows, the challenges, and the triumphs. It is about building something together with patience and dedication, but above all with respect and empathy. I leave you with this final piece of advice. Love with all your heart, but never forget to love yourself too. When you value yourself, when you recognize your own worth, it is easier to offer the best of yourself to others. And in love, son, the best of you is the only thing that really matters. I hope these words accompany you in your days, like a gentle breeze that reminds you that you can always grow, learn, and build deeper and more meaningful relationships. Life is not always simple, but with love, understanding, and respect, it can be much more beautiful than you imagine. And now, go and apply what we have talked about. Be the partner, the friend, and the person you truly want to be. Because, at the end of the day, that is what makes the difference. With all my love, son, I wish you the best in this beautiful and sometimes complicated journey that is life. Take care of yourself and those you love. Give the video a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel to see more content like this. Leave a comment to share your opinion, and we'll take it into account for future videos.